everybody, I'm Jessica Henry Gray. I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to take you out in the woods. I'm going to do a pen and ink plein air. And last week I went out in the woods and we did a watercolor and a little drawing sketch of some trees in the woods. And I thought, let's go ahead and do this week with a plein air sketch. Let's go ahead and do a plein air of pen and inking just in the woods. So that's what I'm doing this week. So I invite you to join me for that. And I also want to encourage you, if you enjoy this video of pen and ink, to take a look at the links below. We are offering through the Renaissance Academy the specific modules of pen and ink rendering. So if you're looking for more of an in-depth study into pen and ink, I encourage you to take a look at the links below. It'll give you a lot more information on Victorian pen and ink rendering. All right, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. All right, you guys, let's jump in. So last week I did a video plein air sketching and watercolors out in the woods. And this week we got this beautiful light snowfall, and I thought, how can I miss or pass up this opportunity to get out and do some pen and ink sketch this little creek here behind me. I've got my little stool and a blanket and I'm going to sit here right at my back against this bridge, just looking this way. And so I will do a little bit of that. I'm going to sketch it, and maybe if I have time, if I'm not too cold, I might just brush a little watercolor on there and see what happens. All right, so let's jump in. All right, so last week I did a watercolor, and I was just playing around with some of my pen and ink this week. And this is just some black ink and a very fine point pen, and I just more or less was doodling. But what I wanted to do was to keep my lines on the trees that I wanted up close to me a little stronger and with a thicker line. And the ones further back I kept very light and airy. Now I do have my ink, and I have a little bit of my crystal container, and I put some ink in there. And so we are going to ink today. I'm going to flip this over, and I just have my white sketchbook where I do some of my own personal little doodles in, just sketching from nature, from photo. All of it is with the purpose of studying nature. Just got a nice clean sheet, and I'm going to get my ink out here, and I will start pencil drawing it first, and then I'll get through and sketch it with the ink. This is my roll-up of all of my watercolor, pen and ink, drawing equipment. In this little container is I have my different size pen tips and things in there. This is the pen that I'll be using today. I like this size for most of my drawing. I will also be using this pencil today. So I'm going to set this aside. All right, so I have my inkwell. I showed you this last week. And actual ink in my bottle of black ink. You can use any color you'd like. I'll set that down there for now. What I want to do is just sketch in place an idea of where I'm going to go with this ink drawing. So I really liked how the creek was sort of just winding its way back through the woods over here. Now this is a little bit larger than I may end up with, so I may wind this down a little bit. I don't know, maybe I'll keep it this size, kind of like where this is going. There's a bit of an island right here. So my focal point, sort of as the creek sort of wraps itself around this back here, land comes this way, and this is full of trees. So I'm going to put this one right here, and other ones back here. This one is coming out of the bank right here, where its roots have just sort of given way over time. And it seems like these trees that are right along the water's edge tend to get weaker. So we'll give a little bit of a balance with some of these that are wider back in here. All right, and then of course we've got the reflection down in the water. So I'm going to show you how to get some of this with the ink too. All right, so first I'm going to begin by building up this sketch with the ink design, and then I will come back through with a little more detail and ink it. Now you don't need a whole bunch of ink out, but one practice I never ever agree with is dipping your pen right in the bottle of ink. You always want to pour it into something else. Alright, so keeping my lines in the background very loose and suggested, I just want to play with the idea that that forest has some parameters. Now let's figure out where my river is in here. Now I'm purposely leaving the line broken in places so that it can I can allow for trees to fill in that area or whatever the case. But again, this is sort of like a thumbnail sketch. I'm just sort of loosely putting in place where I want the main ideas of my woodland river sketch to be. Alright, now to get into some of these trees back in here. I always try to start with furthest away first. Keep them light, suggested. And I can come back in and give more information to those, but that gives a sense of where those are going to be placed. If you notice, I'm not pressing very hard with my pen so that the tip comes apart. I'm keeping it I'm letting the ink flow out of that crack in the middle. So now I'm going to sort of begin by putting in some of these main characters. And that one has the snow on it. Okay, now I'm going to come back through here and make sure that everything is starting to have a sense of belonging and placement in here. So there's these trees back here that are creating reflections that are important in my composition. I'm thinking again too about the character of the tree. You don't want to go by just what you know, but you also want to lean heavily on what it is that you see. Fallen logs. Okay. Now I want to come back through now and start to really isolate my darkest values. So where the bank is casting a shadow or a feeling of the tree is creating a reflection, those are areas now that I'm going to start to put into my design so that it can start to have that feeling like there's some substance here. Give this tree some form this way. Where's the snow on that? Okay. Using my pen to define the shape of the tree, I can curve around and indicate the shape of the trunk that way. Again, this is just giving me that sense of form for the darker tree shapes. In the short break, I have been working on building up the value of this reflection in the water, the darker passages. It's not as dark as I can go or will go, but I'm giving it a middle tone by just making some very light passes with my pen. And I'm keeping them as parallel as possible, bearing in mind that there are places over there that are picking up the sky in the water. So I want to keep those areas white, the white of the paper. So without making the edges too interesting, I'm just keeping that contrast to a lesser degree as the eye goes off the page. Just a compositional rule that you want to bear in mind. So again, to darken this tree that I just put in, I felt it was needed because of the way the reflection of it in the water sort of angles us back in. So giving that a sense of balance there. Island I kind of want to work on a little bit in here. So I'm taking my cues how the ground sort of has a slight swell. So on this side of this little leafy island, it's shadowed more in here, creating something of a bank. And I'm putting a little bit more pressure so that my line is a little thicker and heavier. Not so much pressure that my pen tip splits apart, but enough so that I get a stronger line there. Once my characters here are all in place, I can come back through and start to add in a lot more personality to these trees. For now, they're just kind of like actors set on their marks on a stage. So pretty soon here, I'll be able to add a few more and leaves and all those little detail things that make it look really interesting to the scene. So again, a little more detail and information in here. And then as my scene starts to wrap around closer to me, I'm going to press a little bit firmer so that these lines appear closer, and then all of those go back and recede a little bit more. So that's what's happening in this section right here. So now I'm just going to come back through and add a little bit more character to the trees. And those branches always get thinner as they get towards the sky. So we'll give those a little bit less pressure. Now, if you want to go get a pen tip, these are easy to find. Just Michael's has these drawing pen tips and nibs. This ink you can get also at Michael's. Higgins black ink, any kind of calligraphy black ink. It's pretty easy to find, pretty readily available. I have worked in sepia inks, and those are very pretty too. You can add a little bit of sepia and black and some water to make really nice antique brown sort of feel. We're just going to let those sort of fade off back that way. I drew this little tree stump, fallen tree. And then a few more branches and things on these ones in front. And I'll make this little island here, have a little bit stronger line around it. Okay, so I have my book here. Got my watercolors out. I'm just going to put in a little bit of the fall color leaves that I see laying around. So a little bit of yellow ochre, burnt sienna. Where do we see some of these? Just a few. I just want to suggest it more than anything. Maybe a little bit more sienna in places, a little more ochre in other places. Again, this is just for doing color sketches and studies in your own little journal. Just to keep a fun little field guide notebook. Just your own experiences, thoughts, times, being alone and being peaceful. Just capturing some color up in here in the leaves. Typically, you may want to do a little bit of watercoloring first over your pencil sketch and then do the inking over that, because water and ink tend to bleed together depending on the kind of ink that you buy. And in this case, it appears that it's kind of doing some of that, but that's all right. I might take some of this blue here, just soften some of these reflections. Might be kind of interesting. See what happens if. And over here. Maybe even a little bit in the sky back in here, just to catch that flavor of it being a cold winter day. Gray. Guess I'm going over all those yellow leaves. That's all right. Whoops. I got some of that dark up in there. If you go quick, you can kind of rub it off. All right. As long as you feel that you've sort of caught the flavor of the day and the moment, that's all you need. I kind of like that little field study. I think I'll call that one done. All right, well, that wraps up this video. I hope you enjoyed our little trek into the woods to do a little bit of plein air pen and ink sketching. I enjoyed this video, and I really enjoyed getting out there and the quiet of being in the woods and just sketching. And all of a sudden you start to hear the birds and you hear the water in the creek more, and I just love that. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and be sure to check out the links to the pen and ink lessons that we offer through Renaissance Academy. They are in-depth and super affordable, and the links are down below. And also, take a look at my prints, the Giclee offerings that we have. I'm very excited to bring these to you today. Okay, you guys, have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.